Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink for today's card. I am part of a nearly month-long celebration with Picket Fence Studios for their 1-year birthday. So, of course, I'm using some Picket Fence Studios stamps. I'm starting with the Rose Bouquet stamp set. I've actually had this for a while, and it's literally been sitting front and center in my container of Picket Fence stamps. So I was kind of flipping through, and my initial thought was to use their Beautiful Girls images, which I've done a video on already and I'm obsessed with. But then I was looking at this one and I was like, ooh, anyone who knows me knows I love the big floral images, because you gotta have them all, every single one, all of them. You can never have enough. So anyway, I stamped it onto some B watercolor paper using my little travel platform. Stamped it a couple times with Ink on 3's Juicy Clear Embossing ink. I stamped it twice because there's a lot of detail in this, and watercolor paper has that little bit of texture. And then I coated it with Simon Says Stamp's Detail Gold embossing powder. Melted that with my heat tool. I keep tilting it in the light to see any parts that aren't shiny and that are still, grainy looking, because then those are the parts I missed. Melt those all with my heat tool. Once everything's heated, I'm going to do some watercoloring. And another shocker, I pulled out some pattern paper. I haven't been using it much. I get a lot of requests to use more pattern paper because anyone who knows me knows I love pattern paper. I still hoard it. I just don't use it as often. And more often than not, it's because I'll get it and I pet it and I love it and I hoard it for a bit, and then when I go to use it, it's been discontinued. So anyway, that's a whole other issue. But this paper isn't. It's the Doodlebug Hello pattern paper, which came out a while ago, and I love it. I've done other videos using it, and it's still available. And the really bright colors jumped out at me, so that's what kind of inspired the colors to use for this watercoloring. So I'm working on my little Waffle Flower water media mat, and I'm just using Distress Reinkers for my watercoloring. You could use just you can smush the mini ink cubes directly into this. I'm using the Reinkers because I wanted a really intense color. Like, I wanted this as bright as I could possibly go. That's also why I chose these over just traditional watercolors, because I wanted intense color, because I was really inspired by like the really bright hot pink and blues and whatnot in the pattern paper. So I super sped up this watercoloring, and this was like 600 times faster and did it. Even then, it didn't take me very long because I didn't do anything too fancy, because when I heat emboss before I watercolor, it makes things go a lot faster because everything's kind of contained. So I don't have to worry too much about color, seeping where it's not supposed to go, and, things mixing up when they're not supposed to. So I literally just like slap down clean water. And then I used 2 different shades. I used 2 different shades for the roses, which was Spun Sugar and Picked Raspberry. And then for the leaves, I used Twisted Citron and Mowed Lawn. And originally, I was going to leave it just like this. But once I was done, I was like, it needs some color around the edges. So normally I was going to do I would either do like a light gray, or I'd do a very, very pale aqua. But again, I was inspired by that pattern paper, and there's like a really intense blue. And I was like, okay, let's try this, see what happens. So I turned on the light, so I could see what I'm doing, and you guys kind of see. I was just getting everything wet, all the watercolor paper wet up to the image, just with clean water. And then I was using Blueprint Sketch Refill, which is a very intense blue, and just barely touching my brush to that, and then starting at the very edge of the image, and then letting it kind of fade out with the water. This works. It helps if you're going to do something like this to, tape down your watercolor piece to a hardboard. Honestly, I didn't care, because I knew once it was dry that I was going to die cut this and adhere it with foam tape, so any little bit of warping would, be minimized. So I wasn't too concerned about it, but that is something you can do as well. But this just worked. I was just kind of having fun experimenting with it and just, doing my thing. Plus, I'm going to add splatter. That always, fixes everything. So after I did cleaned up my media mat, I just used a baby white for that. I pulled out these Fine Tech colors. I haven't used these in a while. I wanted some gold splatter, so I pulled this out. I'll link to this set, but I will also link to the Prima set that I've used many times. That works very nice as well. The Prima set is significantly cheaper. This is a fairly pricey set of metallic watercolors. All the Fine Tech ones they are gorgeous though, because they're mica, and they're just they are gorgeous. but they are very, they're up there in price. I kind of like, when I clicked on it to look at it again tonight, I was like, I really paid that much money for that. But I like collecting watercolors, so what can I say? For me, it's worth it. But like I said, I will link to the Primo one as well. That is significantly cheaper. That for things like splatter, you don't have to go quite so fancy. But anyway, I can go on to like, I have so many tangents. I have a million thoughts going on in my head. So I did a little bit of splatter with the gold. And I actually ended up like painting, like literally like dabbing my brush onto this and creating larger splatter, because it was like, you can't see it. You can't see the gold. You need to see the gold. I spent all this money on it. Anyway, so I just added like actual intentional splatter and then let it completely dry before I ran that through my die cut machine. I die cut it with one of the Simon Says Stamp rectangle wafer dies, and that's a nice way to flatten it out, even if you weren't going to die cut. To when a watercolor piece is completely dry, run it through your die cut machine with clean plates, make sure they're smooth, and that can also flatten it out. But I wanted to die cut it anyway, so I die cut it. I also die cut some of that gorgeous blue pattern paper, and then I went through my stash and I found this is Lawn Fawn's Blue Jay cardstock, is like a very close match to this pattern paper. So I heat embossed a sentiment from the Forgot to Say Thank You stamp set, also from Picket, and I really like the sentiments in this one, and it's just a nice little set. So I heat embossed that one with the same gold embossing powder, and while I was at it, I was like, oh, I might as well do the inside of the card as well. So I pulled another sentiment from the Forgot to Say Thank You stamp set, and I'm going to line this up onto the inside of the card, and I'm going to gold heat emboss this one as well. And the inside one says, for all the times I forgot to say thank you. That is a sentiment I could use on pretty much every thank you card all the time. So heat embossed this one with the gold embossing powder as well. I wanted to do that first before I stamped anything else on the inside of the card, because anything else, there's a good chance the embossed powder would cling to it. So I did the sentiment first, melted that with my heat tool. Once I've got that, again, smooth and melted and shiny, I'm going to stamp the Rose Bouquet. I was originally going to use oxide ink, and then I remembered, because I keep forgetting I have these. Reinker released the Distress, some of the Distress colors in archival inks. They come in little sets of the little mini rectangle cubes. And I showed them in a haul video forever, like whenever it was they released it, months ago. I've used them a few times, but I always forget I have them. But I remembered this time that I have those archival inks. So I pulled out the Picked Raspberry one, and it just, these stamp like a dream. Like, that's the only thing with regular Distress ink. It's not meant for stamping. Oxide stamps really well. But if you want that really intense, dye ink look, this is where the archival comes in. Like, look at that color. It is phenomenal. The one thing though with archival inks, and a lot of inks, especially anything really intense like this Picked Raspberry color, they will stain your stamps. Staining does not bother me in the least. But when it comes to archival inks, just because of the type of ink it is, I highly recommend having a ultra clean cleaner. I'm using the Simon Says Dauber one. I'll link to that. But you can get spray versions of it, etc. But that really helps with all kinds of ink, getting them off your stamps. Like, they'll still stain. Like, there's still that pink staining. That doesn't bother me. But the excess ink, it removes it like a dream. So, removed all the ink off my stamp. And I can set that aside and put it back in the packaging later. So the inside of my card is now stamped with sentiment, and it's got the flowers. So now it's time to actually start assembling everything. So I cut down a couple scraps of the Doodlebug Hello pattern paper to go with this. I'm going very old school with this. It kind of brought back memories. I'm like, I used to do this all the time on like every single card I made. So it's just funny how, my styles change, my preferences change, the way I do things have changed. But every once in a while, it's fun to kind of go back. So I cut down those strips, and then I just used my little cutter bee scissors to cut little flag ends in all of these by cutting a notch down the center. And then you just meet the end of the paper to the center of that notch with the scissors, and then you get little flag ends. So I did that with all three pieces. And then I'm going to adhere all of these directly to my watercolor panel, and I'm just using some Studio Caudia glue for this. So once I get these adhered into place, I can flip this over and trim off the excess with scissors. So I got all those adhered, and I purposely kind of placed it all so it didn't really cover much of those flowers at all, because I really wanted those to be the focus of this card because of the watercoloring plus the heat embossing and just everything. So I got those trimmed off, and then I'm going to adhere the pattern paper that I had also die cut with the largest of the Simon rectangle wafer dies, because the largest wafer die is A2 size, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So I die cut the pattern paper with that, and I'm going to adhere that directly to my card base with that same Studio Cadia glue, and this is going to completely cover up the card base, so all you're going to see is the pattern paper. So I do that, and then for my watercolored panel, I'm going to use Simon's Big Mama foam tape that I've been using now for a couple years. I forget how long ago. I've been using this for a while. I love this foam tape because it's thinner than the standard foam tape. And this was the last of this roll. I've used up an entire roll of this, and the rolls are huge, by the way. FYI, the only reason I'm mentioning that is someone tagged me on Instagram and they're like, they've changed it, it's improved, the release paper comes off so much easier now. And I'm like, really? And I literally just got another roll. I ordered it few weeks ago, and I just got it, not too long ago, and it's been sitting, and it's true. I will get into that in another video, but yeah, it's better, it's improved. The release paper comes off. You don't have to fiddle with scissors like I do to remove it. It literally just peels right up. It's phenomenal. I'm back in love with it. I'm probably going to go through this roll even faster than the last one. Anywho, adhered the watercolor panel with that foam tape, so it's just popped up a little bit. And then I still had to add some jewels. Even though I had the gold heat embossing and the gold splatter, I still had to add some more bling. So I just have some pretty pink posh metallic gold jewels, and I'm going to adhere them into place with that Studio Cadia glue. Once this is all adhered, this card will be done. As always, there will be a link below the video to my blog post. I'll have links to all the supplies used. I also have a big giveaway. There's sale info on my blog. All that info, definitely worth checking out. It will all be linked directly below my video in the blog post. So check that out below if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching, for subscribing, for thumbs upping, for commenting. I really, really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!